farmer's cat kept bringing back strange, sweet-smelling shells from the riverbank. When the farmer had them tested, it changed his life forever. In northern Vermont, farmer Jacob Miller was mending a broken gate when his tabby cat Willow padded over, dropping yet another pale shell at his feet. For weeks, Willow had been slipping away towards the creek and returning with these oddly shaped pieces, each smooth, heavy, and giving off a faint, unusual scent that reminded Jacob of damp metal. Jacob gathered the growing pile on his porch, puzzled by their strange patterns and colors, so unlike anything he'd ever seen along the river before. Uneasy, he packed a dozen into a wooden crate and drove to the State University's biology lab. Inside, Professor Alvarez examined the samples while Jacob paced nervously in the hallway. Not long after, his neighbor arrived, saying he'd discovered similar shells scattered along the banks behind his own fields. When the professor finally stepped out clutching the lab results with a stunned expression, Jacob realized these strange shells his cat kept finding weren't ordinary at all. They were about to change everything. The morning after his tabby cat Willow had returned with yet another one of those strange, pale shells, Jacob Miller couldn't shake the unease twisting in his stomach. The pile on his porch was now too large to ignore. Some pieces were small enough to fit in his palm, others the size of a dinner plate. They were unlike any shells he'd ever seen along the Vermont riverbanks. Their surfaces shimmered faintly when the sunlight hit them, and when he held one close, there was a faint metallic tang in the air. Sharp enough to sting his nose, Jacob packed the shells carefully into an old wooden crate lined with a blanket and loaded them onto the back of his truck. Willow, as though she sensed the importance of the trip, leapt into the passenger seat and curled up, her green eyes watching him silently. Jacob drove into town, the weight of uncertainty pressing on him with each mile. At the State University, he carried the crate into the biology lab. Professor Alvarez, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice, looked intrigued the moment Jacob uncovered the shells. She picked one up with gloved hands, turning it under the fluorescent lights. "These aren't ordinary freshwater shells," she murmured, almost to herself. "Do you mind if I run some tests?" Jacob nodded quickly. "Please, I need to know what they are. My cat keeps finding them by the creek." As Alvarez disappeared into the back room with the samples, Jacob paced the corridor outside, his boots clattering against the linoleum. Every minute felt like an hour. Willow, restless now, sat at his feet, her tail flicking back and forth. After what felt like forever, the door opened, and Alvarez stepped out, her expression frozen somewhere between wonder and disbelief. In her hands was a folder stuffed with printouts. "Jacob," she said slowly, "I think you need to sit down." His stomach dropped. "What did you find?" She laid the papers out on the table. The tests showed the shells weren't from any species known to the region or even the continent. Their composition contained traces of rare organic compounds usually only found in marine fossils, millions of years old, mixed with metallic elements that had no business being in a river ecosystem. "These shells," Alvarez said, her voice hushed, "are remnants of a species that shouldn't exist anymore. They're at least 65 million years old. Yet they're not fossils. They're fresh, as though they were shed yesterday." Jacob stared at her, words failing him. "Are you saying they're alive?" She nodded, "Or something close to it. I've already contacted a colleague in marine paleobiology. He's on his..." Before Jacob could respond, the door opened again, and in walked his neighbor, Paul Harris, a tall man in his late 40s who lived half a mile downriver. He carried a small canvas sack and dumped it onto the table. Inside were more shells, identical to Jacob. "My kids found these along our stretch of the creek," Paul said, his voice uneasy. "Figured I'd better show you." The room fell silent. Within days, the quiet Vermont town was swarming with scientists. Vans marked with university logos rolled up to Jacob's farm. Teams of researchers set up tents and equipment along the creek. They brought scanning devices, underwater drones, and sonar machines, eager to uncover what Willow had stumbled upon. At first, Jacob kept his distance, standing on the porch with Willow perched on the railing beside him. He watched as the scientists waded into the creek, combing the muddy bottom and dredging up more of the strange shells. They spoke in hushed voices, their excitement barely contained. Professor Alvarez stopped by that evening, a grim look on her face. "Jacob," she said quietly, You should know. The tests confirm it. These shells contain traces of iridium and osmium, rare elements, extremely valuable. Jacob frowned. Valuable? How valuable are we talking? She hesitated. Tens of thousands of dollars per pound, maybe more. Museums, collectors, research institutions, they'll all be desperate for them. The words hit Jacob like a thunderclap. He'd spent his life scraping by on his modest farm, never imagining he'd stumble across something like this. And yet as the truth sank in, a new worry gnawed at him. If these shells were worth that much, how long before word spread? How long before outsiders came knocking? His fears weren't misplaced. Within a week, reporters began arriving. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Strangers loitered by the fence line, snapping photographs and shouting questions. Jacob's once quiet farm had turned into the center of a frenzy. Through it all, Willow kept slipping away to the creek, returning each time with another shell. She'd drop it proudly at Jacob's feet, as though she knew she was the one who had changed his life forever. Soon, the university confirmed the unthinkable. The creek wasn't just scattered with shells. Beneath the water lay the remains of an ancient subterranean cavern, sealed for millions of years and only recently exposed by shifting current. Inside, they believed, was a thriving colony of creatures thought long extinct. Diving teams were assembled. The world watched as cameras were lowered into the dark, silty water. What they captured left scientists speechless, and the public riveted. The footage revealed massive, spiraled shells half buried in the sediment, some pulsing faintly as though alive. Strange movements rippled beneath the murky surface. The cavern extended further than the drones could map, its walls lined with mineral deposits, rich in rare metal. Jacob watched the live broadcast from his living room. Willow curled in his lap. His phone buzzed non-stop with calls from journalists, museum directors, even government officials. Offers rolled in faster than he could read them. Some wanted the shells for research, others for display, and some, Jacob suspected, for reasons far less noble. Overnight, his 200-acre farm became one of the most important paleontological sites in North America. Scientists called it the discovery of the century. Collectors called it priceless. For Jacob, it was overwhelming. He'd gone from fixing a broken gate to being at the center of a global story, all because his curious little cat had wandered down to the creek. Willow, of course, seemed unfazed by the chaos. She still prowled the porch, still slipped away whenever she pleased, and always came back with another shell. The scientists began to joke that she was the best field assistant they'd ever had. Some even started calling her the fossil cat. Yet behind the excitement, a quiet tension lingered. The scientists had confirmed that some of the shells weren't just old, they were new. Something in that hidden cavern was alive, shedding its shells even now. And if those creatures were truly alive, no one could predict what would happen next. Jacob stood on his porch one evening, as the sun set over the hills, holding the latest shell Willow had brought him. Its surface glistened with faint, iridescent patterns, unlike any of the other. He traced the ridges with his thumb, a chill running through him. Whatever lay hidden beneath that creek had already changed his life forever, and he knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. Dog.